Good afternoon. You are listening to Radyo Kapwa on CKUT 90.3 FM. Where all Filipinos are Filipino enough.
Mabuhay, magandang hapon, nakikinig po kayo sa Radyo Kapwa, CKUT 90.3 FM, where all Filipinos are Filipinos enough. This is Vero speaking, and I'm joined with Desiree Ruiz and our dear engineer Laura and our dear guest Deann Louise Nardo. For today's broadcasting, again, every time we start, we always start with a little icebreaker, which is going to be winter preparation rituals for today. I can start. I don't know what rituals. I think for me would be adding on the plastics on our windows, just because I live in a building that is a little bit older than most. My hydro bill is higher than usual, particularly in winter. And yeah, I think one of the rituals that I normally do when winter comes is adding on plastics in my window just to help heat up my home. In terms of that, maybe add more food like canned goods, just because sometimes I feel lazy. I start freezing some stuff, so like the sile, like my chili, I start freezing them. I start freezing my gingers too, and I stock up a little bit with like food, just because sometimes when it's cold, it's cuddle weather, you don't want to get out. So that's me.
Thank you for sharing that, Vero, and hello to everybody who's listening. Welcome back if you've been here before, and welcome to those that are new and tuning in to Radio Kapwa CKUT 90.3 FM for the first time. So yes, winter preparations. I was just having this conversation with everyone here earlier. I put up a tempo every year, and I have for many years. And this year we put it up about 2 weeks ago when the weather was really warm. And we start off with putting up my neighbor's tempo first. And so they have 2 tempos, and then it's such a beautiful experience that I now realize is a ritual. But so they start putting up theirs, and you hear the tempo polls, right? So you're like, oh, okay, it's tempo day, and because you hear the polls as they're taking it out of their shed, you hear the polls, and I'm like, you get the text message, okay, tempo day, and then all the neighbors came out, and we do this together. And this year, my daughter was in and out, and she was the assigned tempo leg worker, and so anytime we needed a leg, we're like, Nev, leg, Nev, screw, and it was just. Again, as I mentioned, and just like for some context, I've lived in this house, or my family has occupied this house for 40 years. And I don't know. I mean, my dad put up a tempo when I was younger, and I've been in this house for the past 11 years and have always put up a tempo. But this year was the first year that I actually said, oh my God, this is such a beautiful community ritual that we do together as neighbors, getting ready for the cold weather. So my winter ritual is putting up my tempo. So passing it on to you, Deann, what are some winter rituals or winter preparation that you do?
That's really lovely. I don't have like a winter preparation with community, which is interesting. But I also do the plastic over the windows because we live in an old house and it's very drafty, very beautiful, but drafty. Also taking out like thick socks and blankets and all that stuff. It's really, and sweaters. But also the food aspect, like canning and like pickling stuff for the winter, because it kind of slows down in terms of produce. And I used to do sourdough a lot, but I've slowed down with that too. But I've been thinking about picking it up again, and because that's also it's a ritual. You're taking care of all this yeast, and you have to feed it certain times. And even in the winter, it's a little colder in the house, so I have to put a blanket around it to keep it warm, so it still grows. But yeah, and also my plants, I would kind of dust them, and this is the beginning of where I need to start feeding them less, because they don't get as thirsty in the winter. Mm-hmm. So just taking care of them right before it gets a little cold.
Is that really sorry, this is completely off topic, but in terms of plant care, I noticed my plants are shifting, and I thought it was because of the baseboard heaters in my house. So I was actually giving them more water. So now I shouldn't. We have to have a
Well, it
conversation
depends on
after.
the It also is very dry here, so it depends on what they want.
Same for me
Yeah.
at my house. So yes, please have a conversation. But yes, I will add that to my winter rituals. Laura, what are some winter rituals that you do, if any?
Oh yeah, it's funny because I was gonna say kind of the same thing as Vera and Deann. So we put up the plastic on the windows. We make sure it insulates the house a little bit more. I change my bed sheets because rather than it being like bed sheets that keep me cool, I want them to keep me much warmer. The clothes, I just put all the summer stuff in boxes and bring in all the warmer stuff. But that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah, so stay tuned. We have our dear guest Deann, we will talk about variety of topics coming from being an interdisciplinary artist, being implicated is the right word? Being in relationship with our community, and activism and art-vism. So stay tuned for that and listen to this song, like our nice curated song by our dear sound engineer, and see you. Stay tuned.
Thank you so much, Vero. And I'd like to extend once again to everybody who is listening, if there are any Filipinx artists you'd like to put on Radyo Kapwa, you can send us your songs on Instagram at Radyo Kapwa. And we're excited and would love to hear the new music. These upcoming songs are called Sirena by Glock 9 and Pansamantala by JRLDM. Enjoy.
Ano ka ba? Lalaki ka ba o babae? Babae po. Ha? Walang hiya ka! Wala akong anak na bakla!
Ako'y isang sirena. Kahit anong sabihin nila, ako ay ubod ng ganda. Ako'y isang sirena. Kahit anong gawin nila, bandera ko'y di tutumba. Ram na may tubig ang sinisisid, naglalaki ang mga braso, sa'ki tumitiktik. Ram na may tubig ang sinisisid, sa patagalan ng paghinga, sa'kin kayo ay bibili.
Simula pa ng bata pa ako, halata mo na kapag naglalaro. Kaya parang lahat ay nalilito, magaling sa Chinese karte, rapi ko. Mga labi ko'y pulang-pula, sa bubble gum na sinapa. Palakad-lakad sa harapan ng salamin, sinasabi sa sarili, anong panama nila. Habang kumikembot ang bewang, mga higaw na gumigewang, gamit ang pulbos na pinili kay Aling Bebang, upang matakpan ang mga pasa sa mukha na galing sa aking ama. Tila di natutuwa sa tuwing ako'y nasisilayan, laging nalalatayan sa paglipas ng panahon, ay di ko na mamalayan na imbis na tumigas ay tila lalong lumambot ang puso kong mapagmahal, parang piling matang ulot.
Ako'y isang sirena. Kahit anong sabihin nila, ako ay ubod ng ganda. Ako'y isang sirena. Kahit anong gawin nila, bandera ko'y di tutumba. Ram na may tubig ang sinisisid, naglalaki ang mga braso, sa'ki tumitiktik. Ram na may tubig ang sinisisid, sa patagalan ng paghinga, sa'kin kayo ay bibili.
Hanggang sa naging binata na ako, teka muna mali, dalaga na pala to. Pero bakit parang lahat ay nalilito pa rin? Ano bang mga problema nyo? Dahil ba ang mga kilos ko'y iba sa dapat makita ng inyong mata? Sa tuwing nanonood ng liga, laging natutulala. Kahit di pumasok ang bola, ako'y tuwang-tuwa. Kahit tinalo na sa tabang, sumama nagpakalayo-layo ni hindi makabisita. Kakain na po itay nakahanda ng lamisita. Akay-akay sa paglakad pa isa-isang hakbang. Ngayon putot balat ang dating matipunong katawan. Kaya sa iyong kaarawan susubukan kong palitan ng lungkot na nadarama. Wag na po nating balikan. Kahit medyo naiinis hindi dahil sa nagka-cancer, kasi dahil ang tagapag-alaga mo'y nakadaster. Isang gabi ako'y iyong tinawag, lumapit ako sa iyong tabi, ikay tumangan. Kumapit ka sa aking kamay kahit hirap magsalita. Anak, patawad sana sa lahat ng aking nagawa. Di sinusukat ang tapang at ang bigote sa mukha, dahil kung minsan mas lalaki pa sa lalaki ang bakla.
Drum na may tubig ang sinisisid, naglalaki ang mga braso, sa'ki dumidikdik. Drum na may tubig ang sinisisid, sa patagalan ng paghinga sa'kin kayo ay bibili. Ako'y isang sirena, kahit anong gawin nila, bandera ko'y di tutumba.
Pansamantala lamang ang amats ng alak. Di ko mapatay ang dapat, kahapon dapat. Nais ko nang tapusin ang lahat ng dahan-dahan. Wala namang papayag kung sakaling magpaalam. Mukhang mabuti pa na wag na lang na huminga, kung pareho lang naman sa pagkaluno. Lahat ng galit na ito, galit sa mundo, nais masunog. Pag nawawala na ang tama ay di ko na alam. Sasabihin ko ba ba kung hindi mo rin alam kung anong pakiramdam? Dahan-dahan na gumuguho ang mga bagay-bagay. Sinungaling ang ginto, di rin magtatagal, nakatago pala sa pansamantala.
Hinahanap-hanap ang mata panandalian. Lutang walang balak makipagpalaliman. Tilang isda ang hinampas ng dagat sa dalampasigan. Pansamantalang mga ligaya, di ko alam kung ba't di ko maiwan. Walang hanggang saya, ang pinakamalungkot na kasinungalingan. Ba't ako umiinom, tama ko tubo para lulurin ng demonyong nasa loob ko. Nagibanyaga sa sarili ko bansa, napilitan gumawa ng sarili ko mundo. Aaminin ko sa'yo, tinititigan ko ang bukas na mata sa mata para lang makahiram ng saya sa kanya. Kaya wag ka na magtaka kasi ganyan talaga. Pinakamalaking pagkakamali na aking nagawa ay ang mawala sa piling mo. Di naman ako nagmamadali, kaya dahan-dahan ko pinapatay sarili ko. Pumunta sa katropa, ang sabi niya sa akin, kumusta ka na po? Sa ubus na ba ang droga? Sundot mo na ng coca. Malapit na magunaw ang mundo ng corona. Mamamatay tayong sabog, umulan man ng bomba.
Once again, you're listening to Radyo Kapwa on CKUT 90.3 FM. This is Laura, and upcoming is John Marvin with important news from the Philippines.
Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Marvin Reyes. I am a youth leader and a community organizer here bringing you important news back home in the Philippines. The article is from Al Jazeera with the title, Philippine Prisons Chief Charged Over Killing of Radio Journalist. Police in the Philippines have charged the country's prisons chief and a number of others for ordering the killing of permanent radio journalist Percival Mabasa, better known as Percy Lapid. The charges were filed on Monday against Bureau of Corrections Chief Gerald Bantag, been suspended from his post, prison security official Ricardo Zulueta, and other suspects in the October 3 fatal shooting. The 63-year-old was killed by two assailants on a motorcycle at the gate of a residential compound in the Las Piñas area of suburban Manila. Lapid had fiercely criticized Bantag and other officials for alleged corruption and other anomalies. A joint statement read at a news conference by top justice, interior, and police officials said three gang leaders locked up in the country's largest prison under Bantag's control were tapped to look for a gunman to kill Lapid for a 550,000 pesos or $9,400 contract. After the killing, however, the gunman, who was identified by a police as Joel Escorial, surrendered in fear after government officials announced a reward for his capture. He then publicly identified an inmate, June Villamor, who he said was assigned by detained gang leaders to call him and arrange Lapid's killing. Gang leaders later killed Villamor inside the prison by suffocating him with a plastic bag allegedly on the orders of Bantag and Zulueta, officials said. Eugene Javier, a National Bureau of Investigation agent who read out the statement, said, Bantag had a clear motive to effect the murders. For Percy Lapid, it was the continued expose by the latter of the issues against the former on his show, Lapid Fire. Bantag has denied any involvement in the killings. He and Zulueta have also been charged for the killing of Villamor. No warrants have been issued yet for the arrest, officials said. Lapid is the latest media worker to be killed in the Southeast Asian country, which is regarded as among the most dangerous places for journalists in the world. Jonathan De Santos, chairman of the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, welcomed the good developments in the case, but warned there was a long way to go. As we have seen, it takes a decade or more to secure a conviction, De Santos told the AFP news agency. Aside from Bantag, Lapid had also strongly criticized former President Rodrigo Duterte, who oversaw a deadly crackdown on illegal drugs in which thousands of people were killed. Duterte ended his turbulent 6-year term in June. Duterte appointed Bantag as Bureau of Corrections chief in 2019, though Bantag was facing charges for a 2016 crash that killed 10 inmates when he was the warden in another detention center. A court later cleared him. Nearly 200 journalists have been killed in the Philippines since 1986, when dictator Ferdinand Marcos was overthrown, according to the Journalist Union. The group led a protest on Tuesday night and called on the government to do more to stop the killings. The article is written on November 7, 2022. Thank you so much for listening. Maraming salamat sa pakikinig. Once again, this is John Marvin Reyes, delivering you Philippine news from abroad.
All right, so welcome back. Thanks again for tuning in. Nakikinig po kayo sa Radyo Kapwa, CKUT 90.3 FM, where all Filipinos are Filipino enough. So let's just jump right in with our dear Deann. Like, first of all, for those who's listening to us, let's hear your elevator speech.
Oh God.
Who are we talking to?
Elevator speech is the worst. It's just as bad as writing my artist bio. It's like, what do I write?
That's the worst, right?
I feel that so much.
Yeah.
All right. So my name is Deann Louise Nardo. I go by they, she, sia. I've always made stuff. And now in my position right now that I am really integrated into is community art and cultural work. So whenever I'm part of all of the progressive Filipino groups, and not all of them, but a lot of them, and I kind of just jump around whenever somebody needs somebody to with a community art project, I'm there looking for grants for that kind of stuff. And also I'm part of Unraveling in Rhymes, which is like a writing workshop for marginalized genders and BIPOC folks. Yeah, so I just make and I do art with people and connect with people through art.
Oh, I love that. But tell us more, because again, growing up, the story that I told myself was like I had a disconnect to art. And the story that I told myself for many years is I'm not an artist, I'm not creative. And I know that comes from so many things, specifically the colonizer or these negative thoughts. So for me, there's always this disconnect with art. And I'm only slowly starting to feel a little bit more comfortable. And I'm almost certain that I'm going to assume that is the case for so many of us. And I love this beautiful merge that you're doing, like community artists and helping artists in the community. And if you could just shed more light on what that looks like, right? For somebody that is a little bit like me, where has this disconnect and probably feels like they don't belong in these spaces.
Yeah. So even the term community art to me is, or community artist for me is, I don't feel as like married to that title, because I feel more like an artist in community that's facilitating art with people. So I personally believe that everybody is an artist. And it's just throughout, as you grow up along the way, like somebody tells you like just even little quips like, that doesn't look like a dog, or like, something like that, or like, that's just a mess. Like anybody could do that, or just any little thing, especially when it's like this moment where you're learning or like you're trying something completely new. And then somebody tells you a throwaway thing, you really internalize that, especially as a kid, And so the part of me that is trying to embrace facilitating art with the community, no matter which part of the community, migrant workers and any person in the community can do it. And for me, that work is all about trying to create a space for people to be able to just play and not hear that like, that's not art, or like, those little quips that we're so afraid of, and discourages us. Some people say those things and they don't even understand the impact, especially when you understand that that person is doing something so vulnerable at that moment, right? It's expression, it's like if somebody sneezes and they're just like, why did you do that? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Why would you say something like that to somebody that is just expressing, like, sometimes it's like a bodily thing that you just want to do. And what it does is like, when you start creating this space for people, and facilitating this space for people, it opens up this way for them to not just express themselves, but also as a way of connecting, right? So you're connecting to others around you, and also to yourself, because you're hearing things or you're seeing things that were inside you, but you never materialized into some sort of artifact, or like to be able to just like look at it, like almost like as a mirror. And in terms of like connection to others, usually when I'm in a space with other people, when you're showing your work, that's vulnerable, right? And then there's this aspect of showing your work and showing your art with people that sometimes you don't even think. Like a lot of the time I hear people say, I'm not this, like they preface before they show something like, I'm not an artist, I'm not a writer, I'm not this or that. But it doesn't matter, like you just did it like that. If it's about the verb, like you just did it, you were just a writer. Mm-hmm. And so when you're showing it in that space, it feels like what it is you're throwing a bunch of threads around you, right? And not everybody is gonna pull that thread back to you, but at least one person is gonna be like, that reminds me of this, or that is just like what I felt, a few days ago, or this or that, or like that connects to my ancestry, or, you never know, and so what happens is that if you're not expressing yourself, or if you're taught that you're not this or you're not that, and you're not allowing yourself the chance to let it out, it's a type of silence, right? And also it's a way where you don't even, sometimes you don't get to know a certain aspect of yourself because you haven't been given that space. And so what that is just like creating a space for people to just have an opening and understand that art is like in you. It's in everybody, and it's an aspect of humanity that shouldn't be gate kept, you know.
Damn. You know, every time Deann speaks, it's like I need to grab notes and start like writing things down, because so much wisdom you're passing on us, and so much wisdom that you're passing on to our listeners as well. In terms of, and you touch so much aspect of it, right? But you know, our colonized mentality and the Filipino in me, and I can hear my mom saying how like, yeah, okay, but like may pera ba dyan? You know, like why are you doing all of this? Like that takes a lot of emotional labor for us, and it takes a lot of time and effort to organize this, to go to a space, to advertise this, and to have, essentially you're doing like the Unraveling Rhymes is run by South Asian women, if I'm not mistaken, or the South youth.
Yeah, South Asian.
I think the youth collective one. And so like you're also building solidarity with other communities, right? So my question to you would be not only that, like, may pera ba dyan? Like, is there money involved in that one? But like, what are like the impacts and the benefits of this, just as a Filipino diaspora, but also building more solidarity, and also touching that activism part of it, right? Some of my background is activism, and I know we used to do art as a form of activism as well.
Yeah, there's really no, like, you're not gonna get rich doing community art. Like, I've made peace with the fact that I don't have the class status to be able to just be an artist without, you know, doing work, like full-time work outside of it. And that just gives me a lot of breathing room, you know. Like I personally don't have good relationship with money because I wasn't really taught about abundance, or, well, I didn't also have abundance. So it was a lot of like scarcity mentality. And so part of becoming an artist was also understanding that my limits, right? I don't have a net to catch me if I just go full time. And so, you know, I had to make peace with that. So I work full time while I do this work, and I don't really get paid for it. We look for grants, and then we pay the honorarium for people and pay for food, especially, and like spaces and stuff like that. And so in that way, there's a sort of freedom to it because I'm not doing it for money. I'm doing it just to facilitate a type of, I don't know, space, healing, opening, you know, any kind of rupture in the ways that we think everybody, or what an artist is, or what people are capable of, especially the most marginalized people. And in terms of like that, it kind of relates to access too, right? Like, who gets to access being an artist in this society? Like, we have this perspective that like you have to go to university, or like you're just born an artist. It's just like, no, like why are we gatekeeping who an artist is or what art is? Like, everybody can be an artist, and I don't need to make money out of being an artist. Like, I don't need to monetize my hobbies, you know. It's just like me making a spoon, like a wood carving a spoon. I don't need to take a picture of it and post it on Instagram. Like, I can just do it. I just make stuff without having like a return for what it is. And the type of access that I'm talking about too is whenever we create these spaces for people, the reason why we try to get grants is that so they don't have to pay to get into the space. You know, it's just like it's free for the participants, or sometimes they even get paid to be part of it, depending on the situation. And it's really good because they can access the space to play. There's a space there where they can just, you know, you would get a prompt and then actually have the time to just sit down and do it rather than like, you know, because a lot of the time, a lot of the people I'm working with are always working, you know, they're, you know, migrant workers or immigrant workers. Like there's no time to just be writing poetry or like thinking about certain prompts or thinking about like a lot of these things. So being able to just sit there, like grants them access to a certain aspect of themselves that like are constantly being, cut off by responsibilities or the greater world or whatever it may be. Yeah. And going towards art-vism and art and activism, it's also an aspect of access, because there's the perspective that art should be in museums, or like what art is, are like something that you could sell for a certain amount, or like, that kind of thing, or gallery art. Like, it doesn't have to be like the fact that in your activism you can use it. It's a tool, just like everything else. And it's a really effective tool. So if in activism you don't use art, I mean, you're not using the whole aspect of how you can change people's minds, or like how you can move towards like a better world. Like, you have to use your imagination to fight for something. You can't just be, and that's the aspect of not doing what the colonizer is doing, or like not using the master's tools to take down the master's house, like as Audre Lorde would say. Like, it's, we're seeing the abundance of what we're capable of as a community and using every aspect of it, and art is one of it, and it's one of the most effective ways. And to take art away from just like art is in the galleries, like, no, like it's more than that. And so that goes hand in hand, that that decolonizing aspect of art as for everybody, and also art can be made by anybody, right? Yeah, and one last thing about that, it also is that there's this aspect of the Western world where we see art as like being behind glass, or like you can't touch it and all this stuff. But like, art in the Philippines is like part of life. Like, it's the adornments, it's your jewelry, it's your clothing, it's your blankets, it's like your tools, your spoons, like the giant spoons in the house. Like, it's meant to be touched, it's meant to be used, it's meant to be part of life. And so thinking about art in ways where it's just like more supposed to be in museums, like it feels like the same way that we've been decontextualized when we got to Canada, right? Like, we're not just this, we're also all of this. Like, and we're not just meant to be kept in a box, like we're meant to be part of this world. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Just everything that you said, like, it makes me think about like how art is an expression of emotions. It's an expression of culture. And the thing that you said about like when you're letting your art out into the world, it's like there are a bunch of strings that you kind of just release, and then someone can tug on them. Someone might find something from that. And I find that very, very amazing. I wanted to ask, in what ways have you felt not Filipino enough?
When I first I moved here when I was 10. And so as I was growing up, I felt like I had to choose, right? It always was a binary, having to choose between being Filipino or Canadian. And it wasn't until I had an art practice where I was really visualizing stuff more that I realized that it was okay to be in the in-between, And what really helped me picture that was when I started paper marbling just out of fun. Like, it's just like where you have this type of paint that doesn't mix with the water. So you take paint brushes and you just dip it, and they don't mix together. It looks like marbling, right? So that's why it's called paper marbling. And so after you put it there, you make the designs, you put the paper on it, and then lift it, and it's transferred to the paper. So it's like beautiful. You can choose your colors and stuff like that. And it wasn't until I was doing that, it was very zen moments of like just dot, 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 and doing that and seeing the fluidity of it, and the fact that it's beautiful and it's like mixing together, but not like, how with inks, you can mix like two different colors and it turns into a different color. With these ones, they were mixing, but they were still the same colors, like that they started with. And through that, I was just like, oh, it's okay to be in between. I don't have to be one thing or the other. And through that, I also it helped me realize my gender as well, right? Like I'm non-binary. And I've always felt this way, but the non-binary was the word that came after, because I was like, oh, that's the closest thing to what I feel. And so yeah, and now I like that coalescence of like being that marbled being, of being from all these worlds, like it made me feel like I'm Filipino enough, I'm whatever enough.
I love that marbled being.
Yeah. And also and just realizing that art is like part of like that marbled being is, that's part of why I do art too. Like, as I just realize all these things about myself that I never would have had I not been doing that. Yeah.
Moving on to the next question. What does kapwa mean to you?
It's it's funny because it's one of those things that you feel, but it's difficult to explain. It's also one of those things that you experience, and it's difficult to explain, especially when you grow up in a very hyper individualistic society. But to me, it's about connection, right? Just like the threads that I was talking about, the throwing of the threads, it's connecting to yourself and to others. And that's why I think community art is so important, is because like you're learning so much about yourself and others and creating kapwa, and kapwa to me is the decolonized aspect of Filipino-ness. And that's why I work so hard to be in community, to be integrated. And it wasn't always that easy, because we were taught to hide, we were taught to be silent. And so when you're finally vulnerable and like you find the safe people around you, you really feel that kapwa, like you're being seen, and allowing yourself to be seen. So that's really important. And so it's not just finding the kapwa, but also like the maintenance and the sustaining of kapwa through everything that happens in the world and through your life is super important. So yeah, to me, it's about connection and creating connection and maintaining connection and sustaining it.
Oof, so there's a lot of like us in there. Like it's like, it's funny how you mentioned that like growing up in a society of like hyper individualism, and me like being born in the Philippines and coming in here and being like, what do you mean you put Post-its on this food like in the fridge? Like if it's in the fridge, it's everyone's, right? And then the word kapwa, every time people ask like, okay, what do you mean by that? And it's a feeling. You can't really explain it with words, right? But the closest thing is what you said, like the threads and being the us and being the connection. I just want to say thank you so much for spending your time with us, and like again passing on this wisdom, not just to us that enlighten us, but to everyone else who's listening to us here.
Every time Deann speaks, I nod because there's like mic drops of nuggets every time you speak, Deann, and you've taught me so much. And it's just, again, a true testament to like listening to each other, expressing your feelings, and taking the time to connect with community. Because again, it's just this coming home to our ancestors, to our spirit, and it's beautiful, and it's a really, really beautiful process. So thank you, Deann, for being here.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's a return, right? And a return is a choice. And so like I was just thinking about bell hooks, and she was talking about love and how when people say they're falling in love, it kind of takes away your will to be doing something. But I think like falling in love or going back to community or reconnecting with anything is an act of choice and return. And that to me is what I always go back to, even though like you've put down your pen or like you haven't written or you haven't drawn or haven't made music in so long, like the fact that you're returning to it is a choice, and that should be something you should listen to, not the things that's telling you like it's not good enough or whatever, or I'm too new at this. Like no, just do it. It's fine. It's okay.
Wow, thank you for that. I really, really needed to hear that.
Yeah.
I knew. I looked at Laura right away. I was like, oh yeah, Laura, yes. Thank you so much, Deann, and thank you for everyone that listened and tuned in to Radio Kapwa on CKUT 90.3 FM, and we will see you next week. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye, ingat.
Thank you all for tuning in to Radio Kapwa once again. We hope you enjoyed this interview we had with Deann Nardo as much as we did. We'd like to thank them for always sharing their wisdom and planting seeds. These upcoming songs are called Pajama Party by 1096 Gang and Mahal Kong Pilipinas by Jane Mara. And I'll be back with your community announcements.
Yo, yo, yo. Yeah. Mic check, mic check. Yeah. Wait. Gumagana ba to? Gumagana ba tong mic, Mel? Oo, gumagana. 1096. Ako na ba mauna? Sing. Kaganito talaga? Ako talaga? Oo nga. Yeah. Pagpasok ng tunog, tenga ko nilabasan. Good shit. Sige ko halatang nasarapan. Tapos tignan mo si Dan, fasting parang Ramadan. Damo yan, pare di na ako niyan tinatalaban. Ginagawa ko lang yung mga gusto nila na gawin. Di ako pasaway kaya wag nyo ko sawayin. Subukan mong tanungin yung mga nasa likod kung familiar ba sila sa pangalang Kuya Good. Kuya Good, pwede ba ako sa'yo rumektan? Sabi nung kaibigan ng kaibigan ko na hasla. Hindi to basta-basta, mahirap maabot, mahirap makakulabo sa pera si Kuya Good. Ayokon sa pilitan, gusto ko yung natural. Pag ako nakulitan, gusto ko na manakal. Biro lang pero walang sinisino aming ga 1096, mandalo yung bayan ng mga buwang Polo P. Pakisabihan nga si Tropan Lucy, J-roll mo na yun na agayat na broccoli. Basic parang holy, prito mo na yan. Paborito na tubibo sa hapag ng kainan, lumpia. Oy, sino na next? Tapos na siguro to. Dami na ngang umaangal, sobrang ingay na daw natin. Yung alabog ng tugtog ni hindi nga daw sa atin. Aayusin na lang natin gat hindi pa alanganin ang gaan na sa loob. Bigat man ang pasanin, nakarolyo babagahin, paikot sabay sa hangin, sirkulo layo sa oblo, malaya sa hangarin ang dating parang praning. Kakahumaling pagkita pagtingin sa malagkit na tanim. Good stop, nasa woods na mala Woodstock, nakasabit lang sa hamok at padukat-dukat, naka-acid isang blat, naturas to bakot blunt. Pero lahat ng yun joke lang kaya nga it's a prank. Isipin namin. Sige, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. It's a prank! Ang baduy, kung kayo lang wag na uwi, sa mainit na kaun usok nilalangoy. Wala nang panag-uwi, tila walang kaure. Bago magturo, linisin muna ang daliri, para di nga magsisi, wag basta mawiwili. Gagaling mo na lang sa desisyong pinipili. Wag mawala sa sarili ang tatandaan, dadaanan mo lang yan, wag mo tambayan. Ano pa yan?
Ano ba yun, Young Wise? Wala naman yun, ito pakinggan mo. Sakto, sakit ng ulo, wala naman masyadong ginawa, tambay lang sa kanto. Kaya naman nandito, napasama pa ako sa mga talentadong tao. Pero gago, huwag ka lang masyado, inaaning mo na ako. Tagay na yung fruit juice, hawak ko sa baso. Malunggay na sa api, pakaabot nga dito. Sa panahon ngayon, puro tangkay na lang yung piso. Asim walang ligo, live ka pa sa bigo. Dami mong sinulat, walang labas na bago. Sa sobra kong payat, hinahabol na ako ng aso. Ingat sa pag-abot, baka ako dyan ay mapasok. Kaso, lalo pa akong ginaganahan. Talento ko ngayon ay aking pampinagkitaan. Wais lang kasi kapag puso ang pinairal, dapat balanse ka sa tinatahak na daanan. Dami ng makitid. Ano ba yan?
Kita mo lumalaganap enerhiya ko sa game, yeah. Bagong katauhan, bagong goal at bagong name, yeah. Dati kong sariling di mahanap, di matrace. Nahagilap ko sa ulap at ine-enjoy yung days. Nasa lugar na di makikita sa waves. Nagbe-brace, may di pangkaraniwang face. Naka-face mask on just in case, yeah. Bawal magkakaso kasi meron pa akong case, yeah. Lumilipad parang si Aladdin. Nakaupo, inaasar sila, inaaning. Takot sila kapag meron biglang bumabahig. Di makalabas kasi kulong pa rin sa quarantine. Nasaan na ba ako, kakagising ko lang. Pagkagising ko, yung stash ko nagkulang-kulang. Dito ko yung nilagay ay ipinatong ko lang. Sasamahan pa kita pre kung sinabi mo lang. At sa ilalim, sinag ng bilog na buwan. Naglalaro kami habang natutulog ka lang. Pakiramdam ko ay parang nalulunod sa dam. Mahiyain kaya wag mo sa akin tutok yung cam. May pakipatay nga ng beat. Wait lang, ako pa.
May pagpupulong na naman, bagong papakinggan. Ito at nag-aayos ako ng kagamitan. Tapos punta kila good, unting lakad lang naman. Nakasabay pa si Polo sa akin na daanan. Mamaya-maya niyan, lalabas na ang kulit. Mamaga-maga pa, mata ko na kay sikit. Nilalaro lang namin yung hadlang kumakulit.
Tanong mo sa bumilib at kung sinong malupit. 10 and 6, siksikan ng sustansya ang dala. Parang luto lang ni good, sentient food. 10 and 6, alam mo na kapag naririnig mo to, nasa kabilang banda kami nang hinahanap mo. Pamparam pam pam, pamparam param pam. Sumabay lang sa bayo, sarap sa pakiramdam. Pamparam pam pam, pamparam param pam. Nagawa namin ito habang bilog din ang buwan, mga buwan. Good night.
Yun, tapos na kayo?
Tapos na.
Salamat, may hina ako.
Sorry Mel. Sorry po.
Taas nyo.
Love you, man.
Tara. Yeah.
Sala dito.
Skirt!
Mahal kong Pilipinas, mahal mo ba ako? Malapit nang mabutas ang tsinelas, pero mahirap pa rin tayo. Walang makain, walang tirahan, ang hirap pumanap ng pagkakitaan. Bakit ganito? Bakit? Oh, mahal kong Pilipinas, mahal mo ba ako? Malapit ang mabutas ang tsinelas, pero mahirap pa rin tayo. Walang makain, walang tirahan, ang hirap humanap ng pagkakitaan. Bakit ganito? Oh, bakit? Parang trapo na itsura ko, kakatrabaho, panay sugat sa kamay at makapal na mga kalyo. Ang kaso'y tila, di pa di makadama na makaluwag, tila ako ay lumulumod ng medisinong walang bisa. Napakadalang pa makakuha ng kahit ano na galing sa tao ng mga tau-tauhan nyo. Oo! Ang dami namin dito! Araw-araw na iniisip kung paano, pero parang imposible ang lahat ng plano. Pagkabayad ko sa utang-utang ng panibago, bakit ka mo? Kasi kulang na kulang. Yung kikitain ko ngayong araw, ginastos ko na kahapon. Ipinambili ko ng ulam. Mahal kong Pilipinas, mahal mo ba ako? Malapit ng mabutas ang tsinelas, pero mahirap pa rin tayo. Walang makain, walang tirahan, ang hirap humanap ng pagkakitaan. Bakit ganito? Bakit? Oh, mahal kong Pilipinas, mahal mo ba ako? Malapit ng mabutas ang tsinelas, pero mahirap pa rin tayo. Walang makain, walang tirahan, ang hirap humanap ng pagkakitaan. Bakit ganito?
Umabot na ng 50 ang mga katutubo, leader katutubo, ang pinatay ng rahimeng ito. Napakabigat ng dahilan yan para ipanawagan ang magpapatigil ng pag-iral ng rahimeng ito at ng kasalukuyang sistema na nagpapatintulon ng malawakang pandarambong.
Patawarin mo sana ako sa aking mga nagawa. Anumang buhay ang ibigay sa atin ay ipasalamatan. Kahit na gaano ka pahirapan ay walang may karapatan. Ikaw lamang at wala nang ibang dapat pa niwalaan. Anumang bagay na galing sa'yo ay dapat na pangalagaan. nakakaranas nito. Lahat ng nilalang ay mayroong pinagdadaanan sa mundo. Kaya kung ikaw mahirap ka na nga, hindi ka pa naniniwala sa Panginoon, wala kang karapatan na magreklamo. Mahalin mo ang Pilipinas, ano man ang mangyari sa'yo. Kahit pa mabuti sumuwas ako, ano man ay huwag na huwag kang ihinto. Mahalin mo ang Pilipinas. Kahit pa naman na pa mabuti sumuwas akay, huwag na huwag kang ihinto. Mahalin mo ang Pilipinas at huwag kang hihinto.
Welcome back. Once again, this is Laura, and here are your community announcements. Listen up because you might not want to miss these. Join the Pan-Asian Collective on December 14th for the last Asian book group meeting of 2022. They'll be discussing My Grief, The Sun by Sana Wani. Email panasiancollective@gmail.com for more information. Next up, this Saturday morning, join Centre Kapwa for their first Kapwa walk in the Mile End neighborhood in order to explore, connect, and move for your mental health. There will be champorado breakfast served courtesy of Eats by Dre/Dre's Pies. Follow our IG page for details at Radyo Kapwa at Centre Kapwa. Next up, this Sunday, La Société des Lilas will be hosting their Brunching and Boasting event, a community gathering and fundraiser designed to connect over brunch, celebrate our wins, and support the next generation. All proceeds will benefit La Voix des Jeunes Compte. For more information, follow Les Lilas MTL on IG. So at LESLILAS MTL on Instagram. And with that, I'd like to also shout out Justin, our new audio engineer who's decided to join the team with us. You'll be hearing his voice a lot more, and we can't wait for you to meet him. We hope you enjoy this first day of snow in Montréal, Tiohtiá. Mabuhay.
Liberation for one is liberation for us all. Tuloy ang laban.